Hello friends, Heidi here from Rain Country. God is good all the time. And today I'm just going to be making a regular yeast bread. Now this is just my basic, more quick yeast bread recipe that I use for making hamburger buns, pizza crust, and loaf bread. And also for things like monkey bread and rolls and whatever. Oh, and hot dog buns too. So we're going to get started on this, and I'll talk you through some of this stuff. And I actually do have measurements for you because this is a recipe I actually created based off of another recipe, and I did keep my measurements. So at least you'll have that to go by. And if I remember, I'll try to put the written recipe in the description box. And this is basically a half recipe because we don't need that much bread. So you can double this if you want. Is I start with 1 cup of filtered rainwater. You can use whatever water you want, preferably trying to stick with a good healthy water that is not city tap water. And then to this I'm going to add about a tablespoon of butter. And now I'm going to take this over to my hot plate plugged into our solar power and just kind of heat this through to about 120 degrees. And while that's heating up, I'm going to start mixing up some of the dry ingredients that are going to go in this. Now today I'm going to be using half whole wheat flour and half white flour. Both of these are organic. This is home milled flour from pre-soaked whole white wheat berries. And I'm also going to be using some seeds. So I want to start with the seeds first, especially the flax seed, because this is whole flax seed. It is not ground. And I'm going to put about a tablespoon, here I need to use my hand, I can get a better measurement, of those in. I'm going to put, and these are all optional of course, but I always like to add seed to my bread just to give it a little more of a health boost. So a tablespoon of the poppy seed, a tablespoon of the chia, and a tablespoon of the hemp seed. And I will link to, I'm not sure, I don't think I got all of these on Amazon. I believe the flax seed I got from Glory Bee. But I know the chia and the hemp I can get on Amazon, and I think I got the poppy seed from Glory Bee too. So at least I can link to these two. Not that I can't put links to a good brand of flax and poppy down below, so I'll probably try to do that if you're interested. I just bought these in bulk, so I have a lot to work through. And now I'm going to put in 2 teaspoons, let me do it this way, 2 teaspoons, is that what it is? Yeah, no, 4 teaspoons of yeast. So this here is actually about a half tablespoon. So I'm going to put in there. But it would be 4 teaspoons of yeast for this particular recipe. A little bit less is fine. Because this is a half recipe, so basically what it is a tablespoon and a half if you're doing a double recipe of the yeast. And then I'm only going to start with 1 cup of my flour. So there's 1 cup of the flour. What you're going to want on hand is about a total of 4 cups of flour. Now, optional, let's see, salt. Want a half tablespoon of salt, which this right here, this little cup here, happens to be a half tablespoon, and that's why I got it out, but I'm not using it. So again, this is the Redmond real salt. I keep hoping I can give you a better view. Maybe if I put it in my hand, you can see better the colors in there if you've never bought Redmond real salt before. Again, this is my favorite. I try to link to this anytime I'm cooking with that. Now, one option you can add is a little bit of sugar. I like to do it just like maybe up to a tablespoon, just because I think the sugar helps with the rise. However, that is totally optional. It's really not going to affect your bread. If you can't have sugar, totally understandable, you can leave it out. But this is the organic cane sugar that I use. Alright, so now you can take a wire whisk, which I don't know what happened to my big whisk. or just a big fork like I do, and just mix your dry ingredients up. See how my stuff's coming up here. You don't want your liquid, your water, whenever you're working with a yeast like this, or any kind of yeast for that matter, you don't want your liquid to get over 120 degrees, maybe 125 max. I try to go about 120 to be on the safe side. You want it warm enough to activate your yeast, but not so warm that it's going to kill the yeast. All right, so the water and the butter are heated up to 120 degrees, so I'm going to go ahead and pour that in there. The butter, by the way, is also an optional ingredient. I like to add it in because of flavor, and again, I think the fat with the sugar combination also helps the rise. Now, this recipe was based on a basic no-knead artisan bread, which is really, really good, and I made that many times. However, I prefer most of the time to have a knead bread because I like to be able to shape it where you can't really shape the no-knead bread as well because it's a more sticky bread. However, if you're going to go with the no-knead bread, you would use 50% more water in this, and then you would just mix all your ingredients together, all your flour, everything together, and just mix it together, and then just leave it in the bowl and let it rise. But we're going with a kneaded bread, so I cut back on the water for this. I want to let this sit because I'm letting my yeast proof, while I'm also allowing the seeds, especially the flax seed, to soak to make it more readily digestible in the bread. So I'll be back when this is ready. You want to usually leave it about 5 minutes is a good time frame. All right, so after about 5 minutes, you should be able to see it looking kind of poofy and bubbly, and that means it's good and ready. So now I'm going to go ahead and add another cup of my flour. Sounds like my chicken laid an egg out there. You can hear it making all kinds of racket, or one of my chickens. So this is almost to the point where it would be if you're going to do a no-knead bread. But because I'm doing a knead bread, I'm going to keep adding my flour. So now I'm going to do 1 cup of just regular, all-purpose, organic, unbleached white flour. I'm really happy that my local store carries the organic flour. One of my very favorites, I find very, very difficult to find when it comes to organic white flour. There's also Great River Milling Company. They have a pretty good flour out, and I'll link to them below if you're looking for just a good basic flour that's pre-ground. I try to do my own, home milled flour as much as possible, but sometimes with certain things, certain breads and stuff, it is nice to have a little bit of a lighter type bread. Though the last time I made my own yeast bread, I made 100% whole wheat, and it turned out really good, and I didn't put any fat in that one. I just used a little bit of salt, my natural yeast, and the home milled flour. Whole wheat flour was so good, and I used the raspberry yeast in that one. Very, very good. So you can see here I'm down to the kneading of the bread. I've only added 1 more cup of flour, so that's 3 cups. So it should take about 3.5 cups. So I'm only going to do another ½ cup. So I might not go half and half. So whatever flour I need after this, if I need any more, I'm going to use my whole wheat flour because I still want to make it as healthy as possible. Of course, that's also why I like to add the seeds. Should have rolled my sleeves up farther. So again, how I like to knead my bread. Oh, and I also found with the yeast, with the natural yeast bread, with my fermentation starter, and you can find that recipe, that video right up here, if I remember to link it. And remember, people, if I forget to link videos up here, just let me know in comments below, because sometimes it's easy to miss that stuff when you're trying to go through all your links and everything. So this is a little bit too much flour. Anyway, I found with that, I got a little better rise on it in the baking process if I just didn't even bother to really knead it. Just kind of push it together, and then get it, you know, just get it to where a point to where I could shape it. And then, yeah, and then I just stuck it in my pan, let it sit for an hour, didn't worry about whether or not it rose, and baked it. And it rose during the baking process, and it was the best loaf of bread I've made yet from my fermentation starter. It was really good. So eventually I will do an update video on that. But yeah, so knowing what I said here and then watching that video will give you an idea. You know what I forgot? Doggone it. I forgot to add my tablespoon of vinegar. I usually like to do that after I let the yeast proof. And then I put in a tablespoon of vinegar. That's my raisin and my blueberry. And that just helps, usually helps with the rise. And it also gives your bread a longer, it preserves the bread for a little bit longer. And doggone it, this figures, I'm on video, so I had it sitting right in front of me and I still forgot it. But yeah, so a tablespoon of the homemade vinegar. You could do a half tablespoon, and it doesn't make the bread taste like vinegar at all. I add it to my pancakes, my biscuits, typically to any bread. If I'm not shooting a video and I don't forget it, that's what I do. So anyway, I just keep adding the flour as I go. So it looks like 3.5 cups of flour, might even be just a little bit much, but it's 3 to 4 cups. If I would have put in the vinegar, like I should have, obviously I'm going to use just a tad bit more flour, but that's why usually your bread recipes are, say, 5 to 6 or whatever when it comes to flour, because as you start working it, you're just going to add a little bit as you go. And I'm just about there. Typically your knead time on a standard size ball of dough is going to be up to 10 minutes, but the smaller it is, it can take less time. And the more you knead bread, the more experience you get, you can just tell. So I really don't want this to get any drier than this. This is actually a good consistency right here. I'm still irked that I forgot the vinegar. It'll still turn out good, but the vinegar does add a nice, really does kind of give it a little bit more, a little bit better rise. I need it just a little bit more. Okay, that should be good right there. Love the looks of those seeds in there. Okay, so I just washed out my bowl that I was just mixing the dough in. And I'm going to put a little butter in there and spread it around. You want to make sure the bowl is dry. It makes it a lot easier for greasing that up. This is just to help keep the dough from drying out as it's rising. It's kind of chilly in the house, so my butter's been very hard. Okay, so then I drop my ball of dough in there, and then I flip it. I want to make sure it's good and coated with the butter, because that's going to help keep it from drying out during the rising process. And so I'm going to cover this with a towel now, and I'm going to set it in a warm place for about an hour to rise. I would say check it after about a half hour to 45 minutes and see where it's at. The more whole wheat flour you use in your bread, like if it's 100% whole wheat, the longer it's probably going to take to rise. So this could take right at an hour to an hour and 15 minutes, or maybe less. It just depends. Especially since I forgot the vinegar, it may take a little bit longer, because that does really speed up the rising process. So anyway, I'm going to go set this in a warm place, let it rise, and I'll be back for the next step. Well, it hasn't quite been an hour. It's probably been more like 45 minutes, and it's already pretty much doubled in size. So I'm going to go ahead and punch it down, right? And then I have my nice little cast iron pan. This is for the size loaf that I like to make. It's a little bigger than what would fit in your standard loaf like pan. This one. And I love these cast iron bread pans. I will link to these below, but I'll also link to this one. If I'm doing the regular double batch, then I would use 2 of these, because I have 2 of these. I think I might even bought them as a set of 2. But when I'm doing this, it's just a little bit too big for one of those bread pans, because I like to do it in my toaster oven, and it gets really high and gets about that far from the element, and then it will burn the top. So this one is perfect for this. It just makes more of a square though. So anyway, I'm just gonna kind of roll this around a bit after punching it down. And then I'm just gonna drop it into my pan. And then what's recommended is to just put a couple of little vent slices in the top. You can put 2 or 3. A sharp knife works better, but I didn't have one ready, so I just grabbed my butter knife. And then I'm going to cover it up, set it in a warm spot. And I forgot to say, I did let this pan warm up a little bit in the sun. That's the nice thing about cast iron. It's black and it's heavy, and it will just absorb that heat from the sun before putting this in there, so it's all nice and warm. So usually about a half an hour to another 45 minutes is how I let it rise the second time. So I'm going to do that, and then I'll just take it right from there, and I'm going to stick it in my toaster oven and bake it for about, I think it's 25 minutes, but I'll let you know, at 400 degrees. I'll have to double check on that because it's been a while since I've actually made this bread, because I've been doing the natural yeast bread so much lately. But I'll be back when the bread is all done and show you what. All right, so my bread is all done and cooled, and that was about 35 to 40 minutes at 400 degrees. And I do this in my toaster oven. And so it could be a little bit different in a conventional oven. And I thought I got a pretty decent rise on it for it being mostly whole wheat. Now let's see what it looks like on the inside. You can see the seeds and all that. So we'll go ahead and get a couple slices. It's still a little bit, it's actually sat for a while because I was on the phone with my mom, but it's still a little bit warm. See, just a little bit of steam coming off of it, so we'll go ahead and put a little butter on there and take it out to Mr. Rain, because I'm sure he would like to, he loves to have that fresh bread right from the oven, and it's already getting to the point where it's not as fresh as it was. There you go, that's just my basic bread recipe again that I use for making all kinds of stuff from pizza dough to rolls and hamburger buns and just sandwich bread. Alright, well I hope you enjoyed this video on that. Maybe even though this was just a basic bread recipe made with store-bought yeast, that possibly you learned something new from it. Thanks for watching. Take care and God bless.